Call 351-3599. Again, 351-3599. This golf event helps the VFW Post 7193.
Your weekends are getting a little retool.
Swear to God, not making a joke.
Check this out. New shows? Check.
We are
Some new talent? Check. Let's welcome the guys.
Let's get it going.
Arnie Spanier.
Unbelievable.
TJ Reeves.
This is what you get.
Your weekends are on fire.
Because that's how exotic it is.
We are
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this morning. It's already the 7th day of May, Robin. When I was a kid, around this time of year, boy, I'd be getting excited. I'd be getting excited. Summer vacation was just around the corner, and probably by now I would have known where my family was planning on going. My dad and mom would always plan these wonderful trips. Usually from New York, we would travel down here to the South, or sometimes to South Carolina. And I want to use South Carolina for this interview, for the introduction to this interview, because South Carolina was so greatly different than New York back in the 60s. I'm guessing it still is, actually. But what were the differences? Well, something as simple as the soda machine. I can remember the soda machine that we would go to in this little town called Chester, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And maybe it wasn't just a matter of North versus South or New York versus South Carolina. Maybe it was a matter of big city versus little tiny country town. And it was just, I have such fond memories of those days walking on dirt roads. I think there might have been one dirt road in my neighborhood, and it was through this little wooded area next to the school. And I don't even think you'd call it a dirt road. Gosh. But there were dirt roads. There was a soda machine that dispensed the 7-Up, I remember, and I don't remember seeing that in New York. Not that it wasn't there. There was grits. Grits definitely was something different. My aunt would, speak with a different accent because she was born and raised in South Carolina, and everything was so different, and everything was so, this is the way it is here. This is the flavors of this place. Those are the flavors of that place, right? Now it's everything's getting mixed up. You can go to any city, and we've done this. And not to say that everybody has melted completely, but you can go anywhere and you can get a New York pizza. We get a New York pizza right here in Ocala.
Exactly.
That's what they say anyway. Well, why don't you have an Ocala pizza? So this should be something different. I may be off track a little bit, but from what I was reading with our next guest, it sounds like that's part of it anyway. He is Bill McClay, Wilfred M. McClay, I guess is his actual name. It says here, Bill in parentheses. He is, and I'll have him explain what this is, he's the GT and Libby Blankenship Chair in the History of Liberty and the Director of the Center for the History of Liberty at the University of Oklahoma. He's a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He's a contributing editor to the New Atlantis, and his book is called Why Place Matters: Geography, Identity, and Civic Life in Modern America. And what I just said to you about South Carolina and my memories was very nostalgic. But he says, this isn't about nostalgia. This is about something better and bigger than that. Bill McClay, Wilfred McClay. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, and please feel free to call me Bill.
I will do that. I will do that.
The name Wilfred is one of the, I love my parents, but it's one of the things they inflicted on me that I've never forgiven them completely.
That is funny. And where are you?
Your name is your name, and the same as your place is your place. So
that's right.
You gotta work your way into it.
So where are you right now? Where's your place?
I am right now talking to you from Norman, Oklahoma, where I live as a professor at the University of Oklahoma, which is actually, ironically, a place I just moved to a little less than a year ago because they had this wonderful position open, and my wife is from Oklahoma, so it's a bit of a homecoming for her, and we were at a point in life where I thought, she deserved a break, because she'd put up with my family and looking after my mother for years and years. So I thought this would be a great thing to do. Her parents are still, or mother is still alive. So So anyway, here we are, and this is at this great university in a part of the country that is still very different. Not in the same way South Carolina was for you, but there are differences. Just the fact that tornadoes are a part of life around this time of year makes it different. There are some natural things that overwhelm.
So let me ask you. Can I ask you two questions, kind of in one, and just kind of let you run with it? The book is called "Why Place Matters." So the first easy question, and probably every radio host is going to ask you this one: what does that actually mean? And then part two, since I think I know what it means, but maybe not. What happened for you that you said, you know what, I really should write this? Were you driving around and you saw a sign for, like we see that around here, we'll see Brooklyn bagels or something. We're in California.
Yeah. What is that doing here in Florida? Yeah.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's like, wait a minute, don't we have our own stuff,
Yeah.
Well, you're the first person to ask me that question, and it's a great question, and both questions are great questions. And let me think of one way to answer the first question is there's an experience that a lot of us have now of our cell phone rings, and even if on the other end there's somebody we know, we see the caller ID, see who it is.
Right.
Well, our first question is, where are you? And because we have this means of communication,
right?
But it is completely placeless. Back in the old days, of course, you and I can remember when the phone rang and you didn't know who it was on the other end.
Didn't know who it was.
But, yeah, and it was always an adventure picking whether you were going to pick it up or not. But now we know most of us have caller ID of some kind. We know the number at least that's calling, but with cell phones, we don't know that number is tied to any particular location. So this is just one image of a sort of powerful way in which place is been reduced to something that doesn't matter for a lot of people in their experience. That we move around, and I say ironic, I just moved myself, But I don't, and the book, by the way, is not a nostalgic book. I'm glad you said that at the very beginning. We're not arguing that everybody should stay put for all the duration of their lives and never leave home and all that. That would be a wrong-headed argument in addition to being futile. But we are saying that a sense of that all places are interchangeable is something we have to fight. Because to the extent that we allow that mentality to take over, all places will be interchangeable, and we will have lost something very important about our existence, about the sights and smells and tastes that you so beautifully described in your intro of particular places that have peculiar characteristics that are peculiar to it, and not any place else.
But how this sounds like nostalgic, not to be contrary to what you're trying to say there, but how it sounds nostalgic is when you think about the place any place we're talking about. Let's look at South Carolina again.
Yeah.
Maybe grits is the thing today, or was the thing in the '60s. But go back 200 years when it was Indians living there, and it was probably something totally different.
Oh yeah, no, and I think there has to be room for change. Tradition is a good thing as long as it has an openness to change, an openness to being reconsidered. And look, this is the great thing about this country, and I would never for a minute, my own family has been an illustration of this. One of the great things of this country is the mobility of the country. You don't have to be tied to the status of your family when you were born. Interesting contrast. I spent a year in Italy as a Fulbright professor, visiting professor in Rome, and I had wonderful students there. But the average Italian does not ever want to move more than 50 kilometers from where they were born. This is shown again and again in survey data, and I saw it in my students. The idea of sort of transcending the status of your birth, which we Americans not only take for granted, we sort of instill this in our children. I want you to do better than I did.
Yeah, right.
This is not this is not part of their lives. We all don't. You have to travel a little bit to realize how wonderfully unique this country is in that regard. And this is not to take anything away from that. What I and my co-editor Ted McAllister had in mind is that there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance between openness to change and a kind of rootedness.
Right. So let's just look at the past, let's say 20 years. 20 years ago, it was almost inconceivable that a person, for example, let's say, who's your publicist? Oh, Linda. Now, she works actually at an office, I believe, and P.S., I know she's retiring. But many of the publicists who work with us are actually working at home. And Robin and I have worked with these publicists long enough. We've heard them, like they'll tell, oh, I got married, and then you hear a child in the background. They're literally working at their desk at their homes, whereas, a few years ago, maybe 20 or 10 even, they would have to have been at an office. Does that shift, does that small shift play an effect in any way, in your opinion?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it plays. But it's interesting. You work in radio. You're used to the idea that you can have a long time professional relationship with someone, just as we can with a radio show that we listen to faithfully, and never see that person in their native habitat, whether a work environment or a home environment, or even see them in the flesh. And I think that's becoming an increasingly frequent experience for all people, not just those of us who work in media. And when I say, I don't work in media, but I write for magazines. There's a particular editor I wrote for over 20 years. I shouldn't name the magazine, but it was a leading New York magazine,
right.
And I didn't meet him until he had a retirement party.
Oh, really?
And I thought, well, I gotta go up and meet this guy.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And he didn't look anything like what he had a face made for radio. He didn't look like anything like what I thought he was going to be. And that's kind of a wonderful thing. But it is. There is some. This comes back to there's a word we haven't mentioned yet, which is citizenship. There's an idea, I think, very deep in the Western tradition of thinking about the human person and politics that we are operating at our fullest when we are citizens, when we are participating in the act of governing ourselves. You can't do that on a national scale. You can barely do it on a local scale, but you can have a shot at it on a local scale. And so, the idea of being a citizen involves being connected to a particular place.
Yeah, one of the places where, or one of the maybe the occupations that I can see this very, very applicable, is when we sit and we decide we want to be an author or a recording artist or an actor or anything. That if you watch The Tonight Show or any of the national shows, you're exposed to other people, in addition to the host, who have a national presence. And the truth is, those are few and far between. Not that it's not a worthwhile goal, but they're few and far between. And you can be just as successful and just as happy if you were the author who wrote to the 500,000 people within the radius of 60 or 70 miles. Yeah.
No, and there still are. One of the great things about, because I have, as you intuited, I've talked to a bunch of people who run local talk radio shows about this book, and it's a kind of a moving experience for me because every one of these people has some, and I'm sure this is true for you and your audience. They've got a niche that's very powerful but it's in that place, and it's partly because the people know you. You know what's going on. You care about what's going on because you're there too. There's just a natural circle of attention.
Right. Robin and I, in fact, we reject the notion that we're somehow radio stars. We say what we do is more like sitting at the front office of the school and make the announcements on the PA system. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and this is, this is so valuable. By the way, I was talking the other day to someone who is a former publisher of the Wall Street Journal, and I asked him, what do you think is going to happen in the newspaper business? And he said, well, I think, if you just look at, Newsweek and Time and the fate of the news magazines and so on, he said, I think papers are going to continue to be vibrant in local areas.
I hope so.
That's where they matter, and they may not be on paper, they may not be in print, but they may be in print, because there are advantages to having a physical newspaper. You can have it sitting in front of the the shopping center or the grocery store, whatever.
But now, let me ask you this: if that's actually if it's actually a problem. And it seems like it is to me. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but it seems like a problem. But if it is, let's just, for the sake of discussion, say it is. Didn't newspaper do this to themselves? I mean, if let's say our local newspaper, the Star Banner, decided, you know what, our website is just going to be headlines and a couple of lines, maybe the first paragraph, and then if you want to read the rest, you've got to go buy the actual newspaper. I mean, couldn't they have actually nipped it in the bud?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you another example that I saw infuriatingly all the time when I lived in Chattanooga for 15 years before I came here. A wonderful city and with a very strong sense of place, but not well served by its one daily newspaper, in my opinion. And the reason is that the people who run the paper, the editors, reporters, not so much the top editors, but the sub-editors and reporters. It's very clear what they wanted to do was to cover stories that would win them prizes, and Pulitzers on down,
right.
and enable their career track. So I remember, for example, they did a 5-part series on Guatemalan refugees in a tiny little area of town, and it was clearly something that except as a human interest story, which is worth maybe one feature story. It wasn't that big a story, but it was the editor and the reporters who have nothing to do with Chattanooga. They went to J school somewhere. They came from somewhere else. They want to get to somewhere else, generally the Washington Post or the New York Times, and this is the way they're going to do it. And so they're not really doing what the paper is supposed to do. They're not telling you what is happening in the city council. They're not getting down and digging because they have no stake in the place. It is not their place. They see themselves as professionals who have a professional role and not invested in, they try to make a show of it, but in fact, the paper is owned by a chain, actually another paper in Arkansas. And so, anyway, I think this is actually a good example, and it gets into another point, which we don't really deal with in the book, but I think is important, is the economics of place. It is hard when you touched on it in talking about the kind of franchising effect where every place has at least in the South, has a Cracker Barrel, and I love Cracker Barrel, but and it's often better than Joe's Diner, the local enterprise. But there is a kind of loss in that.
Do you know what I think, Bill? That maybe gels an area, and I'm just kind of putting this out there just to get your feedback. Is like a university or a sports team or something that everybody says, well, like around here, everybody's like latches onto. Well, you name it. I mean, I'm going to offend somebody if I name one, but let's say the Gators is the University of Florida thing. So while that's not absolutely true across the board, it is clearly a pivoting. What do you want to say? A rallying point for many of the people. So. And I don't know, maybe in other cities it would be like the Metropolitan Opera House or something. That's probably not.
Well,
true.
Here it's OU football. I mean, it is the religion,
Yeah. So, but that kind of binds together the people who live in that area, don't you think?
It does. Oh, and it's I've never lived any place like this where it is so powerful. What you're talking about, and most professors are disdainful of athletics. You know, they think it should all go away, and it's not central to the mission of the university and all that. And I've never had a strong opinion about that. But you come here and you see how the whole willingness of the state to support higher education is in some way tied to the way in which OU football and it gives around this what you call a rallying point. It's a really great way to put it. And it is one of the things that makes this a place. And one needs to be respectful of that. You know that you don't just come blustering in and say this all has to be different. By the way, your intro about going. I grew up in Maryland, near Baltimore, and but I remember when the going south. And going to South Carolina, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. These were like alien territories. In a very spicy and interesting way, though. And I still feel a little bit of that, mostly because of the climate. But you know, the South in particular, you know, has always had a lot of distinctiveness within America. You know, it's not a coincidence that so many Southern writers have a strong sense of place. You know, Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, people like that. That's a very, very heavy, palpable element in their writing, and it's part of the reason why they're among our greatest writers.
Well, and you know, one of the things that we do as human beings that seems like it's a natural thing to do is we reject the notion when somebody comes into an area and says, you know, back in New York, this is how we do it. We reject that notion. Now, I'm from New York, but trust me, I know better than to do that. I think that's a good sign in a way that we do that, because it kind of does kind of defend the idea that somebody wants to change us to be something else. Yeah.
And, you know, there's one of the chapters in the book has the title, I Can't Believe You're from L.A., and it was written by Dana Gioia, who's a poet, and it's a terrific essay, sort of debunking the idea that L.A. is the sort of world capital of placelessness. That in fact, you know, it's a very superficial. You know, it's the impression people get driving from the airport to their hotel on the freeway that everything is always in motion. People are in their cars all the time.
Right.
You know, they do get out of their cars, and there are lots and lots of very grounded, rooted, particularly ethnic communities that he describes in great and lively detail. And it really, to your listeners, that this article is worth the price of admission alone. Dana Gioia's article in the book. But,
so is the conclusion that we embrace our place and protect or defend its integrity, but at the same time allow ourselves to enjoy traveling to other places?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would go even further and say that if you don't go away, you'll never, for some period of time, you'll never see the place that you come from in its fullness. You have to go away to appreciate it. You know, just like when you, this is a funny analogy, but I think it works. Is that ideally, you know, we grow up in a happy, or at least cohesive family, and then we go off and do our thing, and then you come back, and at some point, if you're lucky enough and your father is still alive, you see one another in a different light. You see your father as a human being, and you love him in a whole different way. That's awesome.
Yeah. Bill, I don't think anybody's ever brought this up before. This is a great topic. We've got 10 seconds. How do we get the book?
There's a website, whyplacematters.com.
Okay.
Whyplacematters.com. Just go there and you'll get directions.
Why Place Matters. Look it up online.
It's at Amazon and all those places.
There you go.
Too.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
Bill McClay. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. A U.S. team heading to Nigeria to help search for nearly 300 girls kidnapped almost a month ago by the militant group Boko Haram. President Obama telling ABC,
this may be the event that helps to mobilize the entire international community to finally